Howdy, this is my narrative paradigm explanation. So, I just got done watching all the videos. And first was how do I say her name? Give me one moment. Chimamanda. Alright, I hope that was good. And then there's Gretchen and Baratunde. And so Chimamanda was talking about how a single story can shape what we believe. And she was talking about her upbringings and about how she wasn't actually African in the sense of what everyone wanted her to be. She was African and who she was, right? So she was talking about how people were telling her, what she needed to, they wanted her to understand and explain things about other countries that she didn't know. And there were countries called Africa. No, not really. So she was explaining that when we only hear a single story about what Africa is and what it means and what it's like, then we tend to construct these huge narratives around it. She even, towards the end, was talking about how a reader confronted her and was like, I'm so sorry that all the dads from your nation are abusive. And she was like, well, I'm sorry that all the men are serial killers, right? She was making the true killer joke. And that was kind of, to me, the gist of her whole talk was that if you base your assumptions and your beliefs on one story, you're going to get kind of something crooked because it's a lot more complex than that. It's more of a series, right? So, yeah, she was kind of talking about the dangers of one story and how you shouldn't just hold on to one thing. And if you look at headlines in the news, I think that'd be ever so apparent, right? It's important to not see one person and try to generalize upon their whole thing, rather that be their race, their gender, their orientation, or even their occupation, right? And just try to construct a narrative about their whole group. So the next one was Gretchen, and she was talking about this narrative idea that we have. She was basically, the biggest one that I pointed out was how she has these types of stories that we all hear, the rivalry, the good and bad, the underdog, things like that. And we know those stories and we'll try to fill in the blank and finish them. And that is how power gets taken from us and how people, maybe in a higher corporation, maybe in a higher government spot, will try to fix us and sell us things and finish the story for us and help us make those assumptions about not only ourselves, but about those around us. So hers was, hers intrigued me because I never really thought about how we tend to finish stories in our head, but we do. And that kind of bleeds in well to the next one by Baratunde, which is about, maybe white woman calls cops on black girl selling water, right? She was finishing a story in her head. She saw that black girl and said, oh, I know this story, she's going to do a crime. And this again points back to the dangers of a single story. Maybe at some point she read a story about a black person doing something she didn't like, and now all black people all of a sudden are doing something she doesn't like. She knows the story, and so she's going to call the cops on this black girl. So yeah, his talk, I kind of, I liked it the most because it had, first of all, the visuals were kind of stimulating and fun, but he had that game, and the game was interesting because you see all these headlines, and he broke it down, and he had the actions against the victims, and then he started changing it. So when he changed it to like, man helps young girl in his office and they start a business and everybody's rich now, it was kind of a humorous point, but also a point that we don't need to keep having these actions against victims, right? He compared the lynching to the cop being called, and there's a great amount of truth to that, because calling the cops on someone of color can sometimes turn into something like a lynching, legally, right? So, yeah, he made a good point connecting that and saying that, yeah, maybe we don't go and lynch people anymore, but when you just call the cops on someone for minding their own business, that tends to be just as bad. So they all really kind of fit into the same idea of this idea of us getting a narrative about one person, making generalizations to the whole group, and then finishing stories in our heads. And when we're doing that, that's wrong, and it's also going to lead to more trouble than it's worth, because everyone needs to be able to tell their own stories. That's what this class is about. So when we allow them to tell the stories and when we listen, we not only get the nuance that our country needs, right? So democracy is nuance and change, but we also get empathy, and we get, a sense of we are all one person with a story. And once you get that, I think democracy works a lot better.